The Resolute was all that stood between humanity and total annihilation. Its battered hull was scarred from countless skirmishes, yet it still held strong, brimming with the last remnants of Earth's military might. Captain Lucas Thorne, standing at the heart of its command deck, could feel the weight of that responsibility press down on him like the very stars above. He had seen Earth fall once, and he would be damned if he let it happen again. "Sir, another enemy dreadnought is on approach." Lieutenant Mara's voice broke through his thoughts, cool and measured despite the chaos outside. "They're sending a full assault wave. Shields are at 60%, Captain." Thorne's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. He could feel the pressure building in the air around him, a storm brewing in the depths of space, and it was all heading straight for Earth. The galaxy had never been more hostile to humanity. And now, their enemies, alien invaders led by a brutal empire, had come to finish what they had started. "Alert all stations, prepare for impact," Thorne ordered, his voice as steady as the ground beneath his feet. "Mara, get me a tactical scan of their fleet." He didn't wait for an answer. The air was thick with tension as the command crews shifted into their roles. They moved with a practiced efficiency, their minds in tune with the rhythm of war. Thorne felt the familiar rush of adrenaline in his veins. This was no time for hesitation. "Targeting the nearest dreadnought," Mara called out, her fingers flying across the console. "Weapons primed and ready." "Good," Thorne said, pacing in front of the large tactical display. His gaze flicked over the map, watching as the alien ships closed in on Earth's last stronghold. The black void of space shimmered with the lights of distant stars, but those stars weren't enough to chase away the impending darkness. "They think we're weak," Thorne muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. His eyes narrowed as he watched the enemy forces grow in number, surrounding the human fleet. It was a war of attrition, one humanity couldn't afford to lose. A flash of light lit up the deck, a shockwave rocking the ship as one of the enemy vessels fired a long-range blast. Thorne's body slammed against the bulkhead, but he didn't stumble. His crew, likewise, held fast, moving quickly to assess the damage. "Shields are holding for now, but they won't last much longer," Mara reported, her eyes glued to the flickering display. "They've got us surrounded, Captain. We can't keep this up forever." Thorne's mind raced. He had one shot at this. A single opportunity to strike back before the Resolute was reduced to space debris. If they didn't break through the aliens' encirclement, humanity's last fleet would fall, and with it, any hope for Earth's survival. "Prep the railgun," Thorne said, voice low and determined. "We're taking down that dreadnought." The railgun, humanity's last chance. It was a weapon of pure destructive power, capable of breaking through the thickest alien shields. But it came at a cost. The energy required to fire the weapon drained the ship's power reserves, making it a one-time shot. And once it was used, they'd be left with nothing. "Captain, the railgun's power systems are unstable. Firing it will drain the last of our reserves," Mara warned, her voice tinged with caution. "Are you sure?" Thorne didn't hesitate. "We've got no choice. Target the enemy's flagship. We take them down, and we buy ourselves time." His crew worked quickly, securing the weapon, synchronizing systems, and aligning the railgun with its target. The rumbling hum of power filled the deck as the railgun charged up, a cacophony of raw, unfiltered energy building to a fever pitch. Thorne's eyes never left the tactical display. The Resolute was still taking fire from every direction, but now they had one shot. If this worked, it could turn the tide. If it didn't... "Target locked," Mara called out, breaking through the tension. "Ready to fire on your command." Thorne felt the weight of the moment sink in. He looked around at his crew, their faces set in grim determination. These were the last soldiers of Earth, each one willing to lay down their lives for humanity's future. "Fire!" Thorne commanded, his voice steady but filled with the weight of all their futures. The railgun fired with an explosive roar, a beam of blue-white energy streaking through space toward the alien flagship. It was a shot that could obliterate an entire fleet, and it hit its mark with stunning precision. The enemy flagship's shields buckled under the force of the blast, then shattered completely. The ship crumpled in on itself like paper, its core exploding in a blinding flash. For a moment there was silence, a brief, fragile moment of victory. But it didn't last. The remaining enemy ships, enraged by the loss of their command center, began to regroup, their tactics evolving as they sought retribution. "Captain, more dreadnoughts incoming," Mara warned, voice tight. "We've done damage, but they're still coming." "We're not done yet." Thorne exhaled slowly, tension radiating from him in waves. The alien fleet was more relentless than anything humanity had faced. And while they had delivered a powerful blow, the war was far from over. They had bought themselves a moment of respite, but it wouldn't last. "We fight on our terms now," Thorne said, turning to face the crew. His voice was low but filled with fierce resolve. "We may be outnumbered, but we're not outclassed. Our best chance is a bold strike. Mara, you know the plan. We'll cripple their supply lines, and while they're distracted, we hit their heart." "But," Mara began, her voice wavering. "Captain, they've called for reinforcements. The moment they regroup." "They'll never regroup," Thorne interrupted, his tone hardening. "This is our moment, Mara. Earth doesn't get a second chance." He turned back to the tactical display. The alien ships were reorganizing, but they hadn't anticipated humanity's fight back. It was a fatal mistake, one they would regret. The plan was risky, impossibly so, but it was the only chance they had. Thorne's gaze hardened as he made the call. "All hands, prepare for a full assault. We take the fight to them." The final battle was just beginning. The Resolute would make its stand, and Thorne would lead them, come hell or high water. But as the crew moved into position, he couldn't shake the growing realization that victory would cost them dearly. Humanity had one shot. And it had just fired. The Resolute lurched under the weight of another impact, the ship's hull groaning as the alien bombardment rained down from every direction. The command deck trembled with each successive blast. The hum of engines was a constant low rumble beneath the chaos, as if the ship itself were alive, fighting to hold together. Thorne stood at the center of it all, his eyes fixed on the tactical map projected in front of him. The enemy fleet was now regrouping, their remaining dreadnoughts massing like a storm cloud on the horizon. The air was thick with tension, and the weight of every decision pressed down on Thorne's shoulders. His crew had delivered the first blow, but the fight was far from over. "Captain!" Mara's voice broke through his thoughts, her eyes never leaving her station. "The enemy is realigning their forces. They're moving into formation, trying to get in close to the Resolute." Thorne didn't reply immediately. His fingers drummed against the console, a habit he had picked up long ago. Time was running out. The railgun had given them a temporary edge, but it had drained their energy reserves to critical levels. Every shot they fired now came at a higher cost. "They're not done yet," Thorne muttered under his breath. "We need to hit them again, harder." Mara looked up at him, the flicker of concern evident in her eyes. "Captain, if we fire the railgun again, we'll be out of power. It could leave us vulnerable. We don't have the resources for another direct hit." "Then we'll have to outsmart them," Thorne replied, his tone decisive. "If they want to play this game, we'll make them play it our way." He turned toward Lieutenant Allen, who had been quietly monitoring the external sensor feed. "What's their position?" Thorne asked, his voice sharp. "They're closing in on our left flank," Allen replied, pointing to the map. "If we don't divert their focus, they'll get too close for comfort. Our best chance is to engage them from the rear and strike their support ships." Thorne nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. "Mara, start preparing the Resolute for a quick maneuver. Allen, take the helm. We're going to slip past their defenses." "What about our shields?" Allen asked, glancing up. "We'll run without them for now. They won't expect us to make a move without shields. It'll give us the surprise element we need." Mara shot Thorne a questioning look. "Captain, if we leave the shields down for too long, we're a sitting duck. One hit, and we could lose the entire ship." Thorne met her gaze, unflinching. We're already a sitting duck. If we stay here and wait for them to close in, we'll be dead before we get the chance to fire again." There was a moment of silence, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Then Mara nodded, her expression hardening into determination. She knew as well as he did that there was no other choice. "Understood," she said, turning back to her station. "Shifting power to engines. Shields offline." Thorne's gaze flicked to the viewport, where the alien ships loomed larger. His gut twisted. He had been in this position before, facing the impossible odds and the fear of failure. But this time, it wasn't just Earth's fate that hung in the balance. It was humanity's last stand. They would fight for every last inch of ground they had left. "Captain, we're almost in position," Alan called out, his hands steady at the helm. "Good. Everyone, hold on," Thorne said, gripping the armrests of his seat as the Resolute began its risky maneuver. The ship jerked violently as it veered to the left, its engines roaring as it accelerated through the chaos. Outside, enemy ships were closing in, their massive weapons primed and ready. The Resolute was small compared to the behemoths of the alien fleet, but it was fast. Thorne's plan hinged on that speed. "We've got incoming fire," Alan warned, his voice tight. "They're targeting our engine core. Evasive maneuvers," Thorne ordered immediately. "Don't let them lock on. Keep moving." The ship bucked under the force of another impact, but they were already pulling ahead, darting through the debris field. The alien fleet was close now, but they hadn't expected a move this bold. Thorne had anticipated their next step, and he was making them pay for their underestimation. Mara's fingers danced across the console, redirecting power to the ship's thrusters. "Engines at full throttle, Captain. We're gaining speed." "Good," Thorne muttered, eyes fixed ahead. "Keep pushing. We need to get within range of their support vessels." Minutes passed in tense silence, the only sounds coming from the rapid beeping of the tactical systems and the low hum of the Resolute's engines. The crew was operating with flawless precision, but the pressure was palpable. Thorne knew the moment they made their move, there would be no going back. "Almost there," Alan said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Ready to break through their rear defenses." Thorne's heart pounded. "Prepare the torpedoes. We'll hit them with everything we've got." But as they neared the enemy's rear, something unexpected happened. The alien fleet, which had been closing in from all directions, shifted its formation. They had anticipated the human strike. A massive alien dreadnought veered into their path, blocking their way and preventing them from reaching their target. "They've got us cornered," Mara said, her voice strained. "We can't break through their line. They're adapting faster than we thought." Thorne's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. But then again, he had never planned for things to go perfectly. This was war. War was chaos. It was about adaptation, about making the best of the unexpected. "Get me a targeting lock on their engine," Thorne ordered, eyes flicking over the console. "We're going through them." Mara's eyes widened in realization. "You want to ram them?" Thorne's gaze never left the alien dreadnought as it moved into position, blocking their path. "Not ram. We hit their engine core with everything we've got. We punch through, and we make them bleed." The Resolute charged forward, thrusting into the heart of the alien line. The ship groaned, its hull straining under the pressure, but Thorne's crew was already at the ready, firing everything they had. The railgun fired once more, the blast hitting the enemy's engine with brutal force. The dreadnought shuddered, its engines flickering as it began to lose power. But the battle wasn't over. The alien fleet responded immediately, launching a deadly barrage. The Resolute rocked again, the deck shaking as an explosion tore through the aft section of the ship. Warning lights flashed, and alarms blared. Thorne held his ground, hands gripping the armrest. "We're taking heavy damage," Mara reported grimly. "We're out of options, Captain." Thorne's voice was calm, his resolve unshaken. "We fight until we can't. We finish what we started." Outside, the alien fleet was beginning to fragment, their perfect formation crumbling under the weight of the human counterattack. But the battle was far from over. There was still one more card to play, and Thorne was ready to do whatever it took to turn the tide. "Prepare for Phase 2, Thorne said, his voice hard as stone. "We don't stop until they're gone." The Resolute groaned as it pushed through the heart of the alien fleet, its hull bearing the scars of the last few hours. The ship was battered, but not broken. Yet with every passing moment, it felt like the energy drained from the crew, the walls closing in. Thorne could hear the constant whir of the engines, a reminder of the thin line between life and death they walked. But he wasn't going to stop. Not now. "Captain!" Mara's voice cut through the tension, sharp and urgent. "We've lost half our fighters. The rest are scattered. We can't hold this position much longer." Thorne stood at the command center, his face stoic as he surveyed the tactical display. The alien fleet was in disarray, their formations breaking apart, but they were far from retreating. Instead, they were closing in, a final wave of destruction on the horizon. The Resolute had pushed into the enemy's rear, crippled their support ships, but the Dreadnoughts, those massive, indomitable ships, still loomed. "How much longer can we keep firing the railgun?" Thorne asked, voice steady but the urgency clear. Mara's fingers danced across the controls, analyzing their dwindling power reserves. "Maybe one more shot, Captain. But after that we're dry. No more heavy artillery." Thorne's jaw clenched. They had one chance left. He'd seen the carnage the railgun had caused, the way it had torn through the enemy's command ship. But now, the remaining fleet was closing in, determined to crush humanity's last hope. "Redirect all remaining power to the engines," Thorne commanded. "We're going in for the final strike." Mara hesitated, eyes flicking between the screens. "Captain, if we divert all power, we'll have no shields, no weapons. We're going in blind." "Then we'll make it count," Thorne replied, his gaze hardening. "We either break them now, or we don't survive." Mara's fingers flew across the console, the crew working in tandem to carry out Thorne's order. The ship vibrated under the strain of the engines firing at maximum output. The Resolute shot forward, a blur of metal and light, cutting through the wreckage of the alien fleet, heading straight for the largest of the remaining Dreadnoughts. The enemy ships responded quickly, targeting the Resolute with their remaining firepower. The Resolute shook violently under the barrage, alarms blaring, lights flickering. Thorne could feel the ship struggling beneath him, but it kept moving, kept pushing toward the enemy. "Steady," Thorne muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. His hands gripped the command station, every muscle in his body tensed. "Come on, just a little more." The alien dreadnought loomed ahead, its massive form nearly filling the viewport. It was slow, calculating, its weapons charging. But the Resolute was faster. Thorne knew that if they could just get close enough, they could disable its weapons, create the opening they needed for the final strike. "Captain, shields are down!" Alan's voice rang out from the helm. "We've got no defense left." The Resolute was exposed. The enemy was closing in, their weapons ready to turn the ship into scrap. But Thorne didn't flinch. He couldn't. This was it. The moment everything had led to. "Prepare the torpedoes," Thorne ordered. "Target the engine core. We need to cripple them completely." Mara's voice was steady as she confirmed the targeting sequence. "Locked on, Captain? Firing in 3, 2. The torpedoes shot out from the Resolute, streaking through space with lethal precision. Thorne watched as they closed in on the enemy ship. A moment of silence hung in the air. Then, the explosion was deafening. The Dreadnought's engine core detonated, a brilliant flash of light illuminating the darkness of space. The Resolute was rocked by the shockwave, the ship shuddering as if it had been struck by an asteroid. The lights went out, the deck plunged into a momentary darkness before emergency systems kicked in. "Status report," Thorne barked, his voice rising above the ringing in his ears. "We took a direct hit, Captain," Mara replied. "Power's been severed from most of the ship's systems. We're drifting." A sinking feeling settled in Thorne's stomach as he looked out the viewport. The alien dreadnought had been destroyed, but they had paid a heavy price for it. The Resolute was barely holding together, its once mighty frame now crippled, its engine sputtering. And still, the aliens were coming. "Captain, I've got incoming!" Alan shouted from the helm, his voice laced with panic. "Another wave! We can't outrun them!" Thorne's heart raced, the reality of the situation closing in. The Resolute was running on fumes, and the alien fleet was relentless. He glanced at his crew, their faces as tired as his, each one fighting their own personal battle. They had pushed through hell, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. "We're not done," Thorne said, his voice low but resolute. "We've broken their formation. They're vulnerable. If we can just—" But then, a voice cut through the chaos. "Captain Thorne, do you truly believe you've won?" The voice was cold, calculating, and unmistakable. Zarek, the alien overlord, was speaking. "Your feeble efforts have delayed the inevitable. You cannot stop us. You cannot win." Thorne's blood ran cold. Zarek's voice, ever so confident, echoed through the comms, like a death sentence delivered slowly. "We will see about that," Thorne muttered under his breath. The aliens' arrogance had always been their biggest flaw. They underestimated humanity's resolve, its ability to adapt and strike when it was least expected. But now, with his ship crippled and the enemy closing in, the stakes had never been higher. "Mara," Thorne said, his eyes narrowing, his voice turning grim. "Get me a lock on the remaining alien capital ship. If we can't win, we'll make sure they remember who they've been fighting." "We don't have the firepower, Captain," Mara replied, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. "We've expended everything we've got." "We've got one shot left," Thorne said, turning toward her. "One shot. Do you believe in this crew, Mara?" She didn't hesitate. "I do." "Then make it count," Thorne commanded. "This ends now." Mara worked swiftly, her fingers flying across the console. The crew held their breath as she inputted the final commands. The alien ships were closing in, their weapons primed, but Thorne wasn't going to let them win. Not like this. "Locking on," Mara said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Ready when you are, Captain." Thorne exhaled slowly, his gaze hard. This was it. One last chance. "Fire!" Thorne commanded. The final shot rang out, tearing through the darkness of space. The alien flagship, Sirith, erupted in a violent explosion. Its shield shattered like glass, and its core detonated, sending a wave of energy that rippled through the remaining fleet. The blast sent alien ships scattering, their coordinated assault faltering in the wake of their flagship's destruction. But as the dust settled, Thorne knew it wasn't over. The war wasn't won with one shot. He turned to his crew, each one staring at him, waiting for the next move. "This isn't over," Thorne said, his voice unwavering. "But we've made our mark. And now, we fight to finish this." The Resolute lurched again, its engines sputtering under the weight of another blast from the alien fleet. Sparks danced along the walls, the hiss of escaping air filling the otherwise quiet room. The ship groaned, and its survivors fought to stay upright, their movements stiff from exhaustion and the toll of hours spent in combat. Thorne gripped the railing tightly, his face pale but determined. His crew, the last remnants of humanity's military might, stood by his side, eyes locked on the now shattered tactical display. The Resolute was on the verge of collapse, but they had one final move to make. One last opportunity to turn the tide before the alien forces wiped them from the galaxy entirely. "Captain," Mara said, her voice as steady as always, though there was a crack in it that hinted at the desperation inside. "We've done everything we can. The alien fleet is regrouping, and we've already used our most powerful weapons. If we can't hold them off, we won't make it out of this." Thorne's gaze flicked to the viewport, where the alien dreadnoughts loomed large, like monstrous beasts circling their prey. There was no retreat left. The Resolute could not outrun the alien ships, and their defenses were shredded. Every second counted. His mind raced with the options, but only one remained viable. "Give me a full scan of their flagship," Thorne ordered, his voice resolute. Mara glanced at the screen. "We've already identified its weak points. We know where their shields are thin. But Captain, we don't have time for half measures, Thorne interrupted. His pulse quickened, his thoughts sharpening. If we strike now, we can cripple their command structure. We have one shot. This has to work. Alan, sitting at the helm, glanced back at him, his face drawn tight with tension. Captain, we're drifting in their path. If we go in without shields, they'll obliterate us before we even make it halfway. Thorne's gaze hardened, the weight of the decision heavy on his chest. But his resolve was unyielding. We don't have the luxury of playing it safe. We're going to hit them where it hurts, or we're done for. Our fleet is scattered, and we're the last line of defense for Earth. Captain, Mara said, her voice quieter now. If we push forward with this, we risk everything. You might not survive the blast back. I don't plan on surviving this fight if we don't succeed, Thorne replied coldly. But if we do, we'll make them regret ever thinking they could crush humanity. He turned to Alan, his mind locked in on the strategy. Full power to engines. Aim straight for their core. I want us to go in fast, close enough to deliver the payload before they can retaliate. Alan nodded, setting the ship into motion, the engines groaning as they powered up. The ship rumbled beneath them, the final warning that there was no turning back. As the Resolute surged forward, Thorne's hand clenched into a fist. His heart beat in sync with the engine's growl, and his mind flashed to his crew, the faces of those who had fought beside him, suffered alongside him, and were now ready to give their lives for Earth's future. They had given everything. Captain, we're within range, Mara said, her voice now tinged with urgency. I've got the core locked. We're ready to launch. Fire, Thorne commanded. A deafening roar filled the command deck as the final barrage shot forward. The Resolute shuddered under the blast, its frame groaning as the weapon discharged, sending the beam straight toward the heart of the enemy flagship. The viewport lit up with the explosion as the alien ship's shields failed and the core detonated. The shockwave was enough to send a ripple through the remaining alien fleet, knocking several ships off course. The Resolute rocked violently, but Thorne held firm, his eyes never leaving the explosion. Did we do it? Mara asked, her voice rising with a mix of disbelief and hope. Thorne didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanned the aftermath, watching the debris slowly begin to settle. The alien flagship was gone, reduced to burning wreckage. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet, Thorne said grimly. We've struck a blow, but we still have to finish this. But as the crew prepared for their next move, something shifted. A quiet hum filled the air, growing louder by the second. It wasn't the sound of their engines. It was something else. Something strange. Captain, what's happening? Alan asked, his voice shaky with confusion. I don't know, Thorne replied. The sensation of unease crept into his gut. Mara, what are we reading? The tactical display flickered, and Mara's face drained of color. Captain, there's an anomaly, something, coming from the wreckage of the flagship. Before Thorne could respond, a distorted voice filled the comms. It was static-ridden but unmistakable. Zarek. You think you've won, human? The voice was a low growl, laced with an eerie calm. This war has never been about ships, weapons, or your pathetic tactics. This has always been about something far greater. Thorne's breath caught in his throat. The alien commander's voice carried with it a chilling certainty, a venomous calm that sent a shiver down his spine. What are you talking about? Thorne demanded, his grip tightening on the console. You're finished. Your flagship is gone. Zarek's laugh crackled through the comms, cold and mocking. You think you've destroyed us? No, Captain. You've only triggered the final phase of the plan. Your precious Earth will be gone in mere moments. Your victory was nothing more than a misstep on our path. Thorne's mind raced. Something wasn't right. What have you done? The voice came again, chillingly serene. We knew you would fight. But you didn't realize your survival was our plan all along. We've already won, Captain. Your fate was sealed the moment you fired that railgun. Thorne's stomach twisted as realization hit him. They had been played. The alien fleet hadn't been the real threat. Something else, something far worse, was on its way. "Captain, look!" Mara shouted, pointing at the monitor. In the distance, through the blackness of space, a massive ship emerged, darker than anything Thorne had ever seen. It wasn't part of the alien fleet he had just destroyed. It was different. Monumental in scale, far larger than any ship he had encountered, and it was descending straight toward Earth. "What is that?" Alan whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. "It's too late to stop it now," Zarek's voice echoed one last time. "But perhaps you'll see, in your final moments, that humanity was always meant to serve us." The massive ship loomed closer, casting a shadow over the Resolute and the remnants of the alien fleet. Thorne's pulse quickened as he realized the true nature of their foe. This was no ordinary invasion. The battle wasn't just about Earth's survival anymore. It was about something far darker, an unstoppable force that would consume everything in its path. And it was coming. Thorne turned toward his crew, a grim resolve hardening in his chest. "We fight," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "We fight until the very end." As the unknown ship loomed closer, the crew braced themselves for the final battle. The real war had only just begun.